not change the technique, right, you are still winning, because if he is leveraging PowerShell for doing the credential dump from the memory, you have already countermeasure in place. So that's why it is important to move and take care of technical intel as well as the tactical intel, and in terms of the analysis and investigation. With that, I will hand over to Shreyans, looking at the time, and we'll see a lot of exciting use case from Shreyans.
Sure. Thank you, Akash. Thank you for giving the insights about unstructured data. So today is one of the scenario which we are going to talk about is unstructured data. So talking about my experience in cyber threat intelligence, I have seen financial institutions, receiving a lot of advisories. And the pain point is that processing those advisories is a very tedious job. And like it's a painful job. None of the analysts will enjoy copy pasting those advisories from an email received, then enriching them over certain enrichment technologies manually. Like you receive tons of advisories in today's date, and it's a very time-consuming job. So what we have done is we have developed a utility called as CTI Ops with respect to the factors which Bhavin mentioned previously in our Threat Intel Management 101, where automated enrichment, orchestration, and like orchestrating the task of intel actioning is very much important. Like decision-making capabilities via machine is very much important. So let's look at the first scenario. The TI scenario 1 is threat intel operations and automations. So talking about this one, let's firstly have a look of what does an analyst do, like as in manually. What does he do in today's date? What does he, what all the tasks does he perform manually? Okay. So the first task what he performs is he receives an email advisory from multiple regulators in the form of email body, multiple attachments. And the next task for him is to parse all that data manually, copy paste them into a text file or something like that. And then he has to manually go through and review each and every IOC and the tactical intel included within that particular PDF or email body. Then he has to manually go to the enrichment technologies like VirusTotal, Abuse IPDB, and certain technologies out there. He has to manually copy paste and enrich them, analyze them into the next step, and make a decision what exactly has to be actioned upon onto these certain IOCs which I have received from a regulator. Because I have to report back to the regulator saying what action I have taken onto this. Specifically talking about the BFSI sector, the financial industries, they have a mandate to respond back off to the reports which they have received every day. Like what action has been taken for every individual IOC. They have to report back to them by sharing the summary. So talking about the response part, they would have to decide what kind of intel will go into which kind of prevention or detection stack. Like talking about different stacks, like detection stack can be a SIM solution, UBA solution, NBAD. Prevention stack can be firewall, antivirus, EDRs, where you can, on firewalls, you can block IP addresses. Antivirus, you can block a list of hashes, even on EDR, so that those executions of those malicious hashes do not happen onto the technologies, onto the endpoints of those systems, which it is connected to. Then next step, which they have to go manually, is for the governance purpose of sharing the actioning summary report to the regulator. They have to document. So going through the entire process, if you look at, it's a very tedious job for doing all of this, like receiving unstructured data to sharing the actioning summary report to the regulator. Talking about reports, if I receive 5 to 10 reports, how much time will an analyst consume doing all these tasks? Talking about the BFSI sector, I believe majority of the audience will be having, and they would be able to relate with this, what their analysts do in the real time in today's date. How do the so we have developed this utility called as CTI Ops, as I previously mentioned. So we'll go through that, wherein we have automated the part of receiving certain email advisories like this, like McAfee Labs Threat Advisory, which is received as an attachment into the email, which contains a lot of MD5 hashes and list of IP addresses within this particular email and a lot of tactical intel. So let's look at this particular email which is received, and we using our utility, how can we look at extracting these email and the attachments from it, and how can we go forward and automate the part which we just saw where an analyst spends a lot of time. So I'll run my script which will connect to Gmail and fetch this particular email advisory from here and extract all those IOCs. So it says extract the indicators from email report, press type in yes to continue. So I'll type in yes to connect and download that report from the mailbox. And we can see that the hashes are extracted automatically. The IP addresses are extracted automatically. So the first task of an analyst to go through that report manually and picking up and copy pasting these IP addresses, we have overcome that part now by doing using this script in a very easy manner. We have just connected our script to this mailbox, which is automatically passing all that data. The hashes are also extracted. The next part which the analyst consumes a lot of time is enriching these identified indicators. Talking about enrichment technologies, there are n number of enrichment technologies which will have the contextual data around these particular hashes. They might contain or associated with many malware, or probably these IPs are, phishing domains and all of that. Like it is associated with any phishing pages or any malicious activity. So if I want to enrich it, I have to manually go onto every particular platform in a GUI mode on my browser and copy paste all these individually and get some contextual data around these indicators. Before that, I cannot understand what exactly has to be done with these indicators. So let me just type in yes to enrich this identified indicators. So we can connect with multiple technologies. With the time constraints, we have connected right now with OTX, which will give us the contextual analysis of these indicators. Right now in the real time, it is talking to VirusTotal and OTX, Alien Vault, and getting us the enrichment details. So if you look at the numbers, there are 69 IPs within this particular list, and after that it will try and enrich those hashes. So like right now, if we see that this script is executing everything in a sequential basis, but if we have some kind of orchestration tool which does parallel execution in a very real-time basis for a lot of indicators, then we can reduce this time even more. So right now the execution is happening very sequentially. So that is the reason it is taking a lot of time. But if we go through any orchestration tool, we can overcome this part as well. So I'll show you what exactly the contextual information which we have received from this particular. So indicators have been received. Let me just show you the contextual analysis. So these are the contextual analysis which we have received from Alien Vault OTX, where there are certain hashes or IP addresses for which we have not found any kind of enrichment. And there are many of them which we have found some connection with some malware, ransomware, and all those enrichment data, we can find it here. And based on that, we can write machine level capabilities of what basis do we want to, block these indicators onto certain security technologies. So in this particular scenario, so if you can see, there are multiple IPs which are also, associated with WordPress, brute force login attacks and all of that, which we receive from Alien Vault. So we'll talk about now actioning upon this intelligence which we have received. So we can write our own logics within those orchestration tools of what basis do I want to, block these indicators. So for example, right now for this script, we have coded the logic. If we receive any kind of intelligence for this particular indicators, we would like to block them onto our firewall, which is pfSense, which we are using in this case. So let me just, connect via API blocking these indicators. So in a traditional format, talking about in banking sector, we have different teams managing these firewalls, proxies, AV, EDRs. So what we have to do is we have to create different. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a way to enlarge the screen, because I'm getting a public response that it's not very visible? Yeah, I think this is better.
So talking about large organizations, they have different teams wherein they have to raise different types of tickets for blocking or preventing these types of IOCs. So like firewall team has a different like mechanism to block it. So you have to raise a ticket onto service desk for blocking these IP addresses. So in this case, if we have API related connectivity and an orchestration tool, we can directly initiate the blocking process within real time. So so I have the access to pfSense right now. I'll just show by refreshing the screen what exactly is getting blocked right now in the real-time basis. So if you can see, the IP addresses are getting enlisted here.
To find the talent for some of those emerging areas can be quite challenging. In fact, I was talking to one of the other friends, and she mentioned once saying that India also has the problem of plenty. And it's like saying that when you have a smaller stack, you can find the right thing. It sometimes can be when you're looking for niche or hot skill, it could sound like finding a needle in the haystack. And the other way I would like to explain is that when you have too much choice of talent, then you get more confused. So there's a very interesting experiment, I think, conducted by Sheena Iyengar and group, which basically says that they put in 3 or 4 different flavors of jam in a superstore, and in another superstore they put 36 flavors of jam. Now, as one would imagine, that variety attracts us to do something different. So the superstore, which had fewer number of jams, actually had less visitor to the table compared to the table which had 36 options to choose from. But interestingly, when you look at the sales data, the people who had access to just 3 or 4 jams actually ended up buying more jams than those who had access to 36 jams. And when they were asking why did that happen, people said that I just got confused. So I think we also have in India the talent abundance, which is a great advantage, sometimes can also be a big challenge for us to find exactly the right talent. So again, bringing back from the experience of talking to many of the colleagues like yourself here on the call, is that I continue to feel that talent is a challenge. Of course, we have done a good job with respect to nurturing that talent. So I would again go back to the findings of the survey. Most people felt that they have been able to create talent. So it's hard to find ready talent, but when you have the right kind of institutional processes, you are able to build and develop talents. So that's really the first part of it. The second part of the talent is about diversity. I'll come to that in a few moments, because I think that's another very interesting topic which we have done a fair bit of research on at KPMG. But let me pause here and invite some comments. What do you think, and if anybody would like to come in here and say, what do you think are some of the toughest skills to find when it comes to cybersecurity in Indian market, and what are you doing to overcome that challenge?
Hi, this is Shobha. I will share my perspective. I will handle different kinds of teams, and one of the biggest challenges I find where it's difficult to find talent is with respect to the development teams. So engineers who are good in the engineering background as well as having skills on security domain is really hard to find. And that the mindset of having that development background with security domain is one of the biggest challenges that I feel which is lacking in the industry. And that is where the gap is. And in order to kind of bridge this gap, one of the things, as most of the respondents have responded in the survey, is to do in-house training. So we get good developers and kind of bring them on board and offer them sessions or trainings or I would say competitive certifications which help to bring them up to speed on the security domain skills. And then, of course, some of the external sessions or trainings that are done for the young minds is also kind of helping to bridge that gap, bridge the gap. And then with respect to the laterals whom we get in, whom we try to fill in the engineering kind of positions, again, we see a shortage of developers with engineering background. And I believe once we are able to reach out to various academic institutions and bring in more courses like what DSCI is doing with respect to Cyber Shiksha or those kinds of initiatives, will actually help us to build a great talent who will have security from their graduation itself. It could be an undergraduate program or a postgraduate program, and then probably that will help us to have the skills that we are looking for over a period of time.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Shobha, for that insight. I think you captured it well, that getting the combination of developer skills and cybersecurity is certainly a challenge. And I would say from my experience, not just in India, I think it's a big global challenge. Because those who actually, it's like saying, again, I might be exaggerating and oversimplifying and generalizing this thing. You got kind of two different mindsets. Most people with developer mindset are working with saying that, how do I just make it work? Whereas people who come with the security saying that, how do I make sure that it doesn't break? So sometimes converging the two mindsets itself can be a challenge, even when you find people who can do two kinds of things. It's like in saying in many ways, people who are cricket umpires are certainly not the great cricketers. And I, being an example of one, I'm a certified umpire, but I don't think I can really do a good job with either batting or bowling. So I think that's one big challenge which we see, is that the two skills. But with the advent of DevOps, I think it has become imperative for us to not treat them as two different streams. The world of somebody doing development and somebody doing even testing, not just security but functional testing and all of that, has now converged. So no longer you have people who do development and who do testing. It's like everything is inline in DevOps. So how do we get to the DevSecOps or SecDevOps, whichever you call it, is actually another way. And I think here India can take a pole position, because as I said, that this problem is not just India, it's a global problem. We can take a pole position because the amount of innovation we are building in the code creation, low code, and some of those areas, if we combine it with our cybersecurity challenge, you talk about the Cyber Shiksha and others, I think we have another opportunity to make India a strong place in this space.
Sure. Just one point I wanted to add in terms of where do we feel challenged in terms of skills. Obviously, deep engineering capabilities is something that we feel there is a bit of shortage, and we are doing that with training and upgrading our core network security engineering folks into this space. But the second aspect which we feel is also something that we need to work on in terms of talent building is around risk advisory for businesses. I think most of our folks are very, very good in terms of technology, in terms of deploying things, running things, etc. But when it comes to partnership with businesses, partnership with various teams outside your own technical team, in terms of making businesses understand, giving them a flavor of what constitutes an acceptable risk, why something that they should look at it. I think that is where we need a bit more work to do in terms of how do we nurture that kind of talent. It's not just consulting with the divisions, it's much more than that. You become a partner of that particular division. So when like for GS experience, I say when we looked at digital bank, we had like 2 or 3 really, really solid folks who were part of the digital bank project itself, who were through and through, and they were like pretty well business savvy in terms of what is happening in the business, why something should or should not be done. I think those kind of elements are important too, and that is where we have some work to do as well.
Blindly going ahead and absorbing all the intel that we have received. And therefore, if you see on the screen right now, as you can see, plotting of each and every relation and then connecting the indicator, connecting the actor, connecting the malware, and connecting all the subsets of an intel report is very important for you to realize the fidelity or the connectivity with the kind of threat that you're looking into and the kind of intel report that you're having in your hand right now, right? Looking forward to the relation aspects, I think, as I mentioned earlier as well, enrichment is just the subset. So when you enrich, you are only identifying what are the enrichment elements around it. But when you're actually investigating, you're plotting those enrichments to help you with that visual effect. And we talk about a lot of things usually, how exactly things can be made more interesting for anybody to really, connect with it well. And what else can be better than the visual appeal of the investigation, right? And that is where, as you can see, a small GIF image, which is actually showing you a small pop-up, which when we are actually querying, we are actually getting a lot more information. But how those information is related with the indicator that we are investigating is what actually matters when we talk about the visual appeal. Talking about the enrichment factors, not each and every enrichment may have the equal weightage for your organization. For example, I may receive an enrichment which has a SHA-256 as a hash or as a connecting hash for the same file, but it's not really absorbable for me. It's not really consumable for me because my security technologies are compatible only with MD5 hash, for example. Okay, so in this case, the weightage for the MD5 hash is automatically higher for me as compared to the SHA-256 hash, right? And similarly, there are so many other attributes which I can actually go on talking about. But I think we have something that we can present, to give a little bit more visual connection for the audience. I would actually hand it over back to Shreyans and let him actually go ahead with the demo.
Thanks, Bhavin. So talking about our previous report which we extracted, we also have extracted the IOCs into form of 6 objects. So what we are going to do is we have a file called as 6.json. So we are going to copy this particular one indicator and going to navigate to 6 visualizer where we can visualize these objects. So if you look at this indicator is associated with Wind Trojan Trick Bot, and if I click on this particular indicator, I can find the details around this indicator. So this way, in 6 format, 6 is also a popular format right now in cyber threat intelligence for sharing the intelligence. Also 6, so this particular 6 visualization tool is provided by Aiss, and right now we can see the indicator here on the screen, but right now we are not able to build relations around this particular indicator, or also we do not have any, due to the current limitations, we cannot enrich this via certain technologies which we spoke about previously. So we have one tool wherein we have, CITEX tool where we have demonstrated the view how we can visualize the threat in a better format. So I'll go ahead and show you that video. So this is a video which we have created where we have taken one domain which is nothing but related to the Emotet malware which we spoke about previously in our report, which we received from McAfee. And now when we click upon this particular domain, it shows us that it is associated with this particular IP, it is associated with this particular URL, and again, it is associated with a lot of other indicators as well. For example, if I receive only one indicator from my threat intel advisory, I can go ahead and enrich this particular indicator to find more contextual information in form of visualization, which can definitely help the analyst to investigate it better. And as a malware researcher, it will help him to build his own canvas and reports in form of, presentations. So if you look at this particular indicator as an IP address, it is again associated with the passive DNS resolution, and again this particular indicator is also associated with this particular domain. So probably,
with the exception of few, actually believe that diversity is key. But when we actually look at it, this being a great desire versus it being put in practice, we find there's a gap. So while as much as we would like to deal with diversity, but we are not able to see that thing getting properly worked out. And I want to invite here, once I finish, Will to also talk about it, because we did a research in the UK on decrypting diversity, and we found some very interesting trends there as well. But one of the challenges which I would like to highlight, that if we believe that diversity is important, and if we are not able to do anything about it for a fair bit of time, it creates a challenge saying that it's an unsolvable problem. Whereas those who actually solved it to some degree are finding that once you start the journey, you can get there better than what you would be without not being able to. In addition to the gender diversity, which remains as a challenge, another aspect of diversity which we want to highlight is the world of cybersecurity is becoming so much more multidisciplinary. And again, the World Economic Forum has done some studies around that, say that the future skills for cybersecurity are not just about technology, are not just about knowing the industry of business. It's about creativity, problem solving, human resources, interaction, personal skills, and all of that. And I've done some dipstick checks with some of the clients I work with. Now we all are, and I think many of you would agree that people are one of the significant part of the cybersecurity challenge. And most of us do a good job of training those people, but not adequate. But if I were to ask those people saying, okay, you have a challenge, say you need to deal with people, but how many people in our cybersecurity teams come from humanities background? I get a very poor answer. And how many people actually even come from a music background? Because that might be able to create an interesting diversity. Because I'm not a trained musician, but I know a lot of people who are. The amount of creativity and the teamwork they bring is very different. So the question which I want to throw to the group here is saying that what do you think is the way we could potentially solve this diversity challenge? Because we can't live with it for too long, because the world of tomorrow will not be solved by the skills which we used in the past. In fact, we at KPMG have created a very strong program around it, and we say for solving tomorrow's cybersecurity problem, we got to have an uncommon combination of skills, which we don't have today. So let me pause here and invite maybe Will, if you can come in first, to talk about how do you see the issue of diversity and what could we do to solve it?
Sure. Thank you, Akhilesh. Yeah, absolutely. So you've highlighted one of the very first reports that's actually been done across actually all the countries and governments that we work with, which was obviously the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre and KPMG's Decrypting Diversity report that was published last year, which was a in-depth study about the diversity issue in the UK cybersecurity market. And I suppose it's important to say why diversity is important in the first place. Firstly, of course, it's incredibly important to make sure that we've got respect from our colleagues, etc., and that we're treating everybody and providing an environment and workplace that has respect and is inclusive. But secondly, diverse workforces just produce better products, services, and deliver better for a whole host of reasons, different perspectives, they build better teams, etc. And what we found within the UK was that actually the workforce is still around 70-30%. So we still have kind of like a massive kind of issue with trying to promote female representation in the workforce. But actually, the UK we think is pretty good. And actually, we're thinking that as a market, it's actually been promoting some very, very good incentives to be able to promote diversity. Some of those are formal incentives, but there's some great schemes that have been produced in the UK, Girls Who Code, there's great academic programs as well. The National Cybersecurity Centre spent a lot of time in research and engagement with universities, making sure that there are active participation in those programs where they actively recruit from as well. But we do think that this as a community is one of the biggest issues and challenges that we have to face. Because your point about what are the cybersecurity skills of the future is incredibly important, because it's not just about having the technical and engineering skills anymore. And obviously they're heavily, those tend to heavily be tied to certain types of background. Increasingly, cybersecurity is about technology. It's about security policies. It's about integration in business. It's about finance. It's about governance. But increasingly as well, it's about public policy, and it's about international relations. So we have to make sure that the industry that we're building is a safe, attractive place for all types of people to be able to join. And, we actually might need to see much more concrete policies from governments and innovations like we see in the GCCs, where we're trying to really promote diversity, because actually it's for the health and for the benefit of our entire community that we get this right. And the fact that the UK is one of the only places that's actually put out the report actually shows we've got a bit of an issue, because we actually don't even have the right data to work out how big a problem we've got. I think we all recognise that we've got a problem, but until we start getting some of those better metrics, it's going to be very, very difficult to start decrypting that. So very, very important point, and I was really pleased that when I saw that in the report, that this is something that is started to be recognised as an issue. Just as a very, very kind of simple thing that we do at the World Economic Forum, and all our panels, all our events that we do has to have at least some female representation for the cybersecurity community. And it's just a little thing that you can instigate as like a local policy, and it's an indicative of, I think, how many of us are trying to recognise how we do this better. But the question is what policies scale, and how are you going to scale those policies?
I have a pointer. Particularly on this, very good points, William. I mean, we do scan, what is happening in cybersecurity skills development in other countries. I agree with you. There's a lot to learn from other countries, particularly in. These are published job roles. It's possible there are some we don't have public info about it. These are from the public portals, LinkedIn and all of that. We have used an AI/ML platform. I think my team is going to publish the report on the website maybe next week. So 18%, and by job role we've been able to get a sense of what is the demand, and at what levels of seniority also. So I think that will give us a good insight on where is the gap and where do we need to invest.
Thank you, Rama, for that insightful way of what the statistics looking for the job roles coming largely from GCC. And I'm not surprised, because GCC is continuously raising the bar, as we saw even in the previous slide, that the kind of skills which are now being deployed in India to solve big global problems. And I personally can say that even for Kpis Global, we are using a lot of talent in India to solve problems for many of our global clients. So it is certainly a place where we have. Okay, I'm conscious of time, and I love the microphone, but I don't want to overuse it. Anybody else who would like to come on this topic of diversity? Else we move on to the next, which is on innovation. All right. So that's the next topic I wanted to talk about briefly, is on innovation. Before I talk about innovation per se, I do want to talk about India is known as a country.
I think the enrichment part, the intel collection, and of course the response as well, to a certain extent, as we showcased in the utility, can be leveraged through the automation. And as you saw, that the control was always in Shreyans's bucket, where he was actually the one who was deciding whether he really wants to go ahead and block. He always had the data sets ready with him to understand what is the kind of enrichment information available for it, and therefore giving him that kind of confidence on the utility, or that kind of confidence on the automation, that whether I really should be allowing the automation of my machine to take that decision and to act upon it or not. So that control is always there with the analyst. However, the mundane aspect, or I would say the fatigue causing elements, are something which are taken completely into the bucket of the machine. For the organization, when we talk about these automation, I think the biggest optimization that usually organizations can see is in terms of the resource utilization, where we talk about, how many people are really working on these kind of efforts. They can actually reutilize their existing team force to focus on rather more strategic initiatives rather than the operational ones, which is most of the times usually organizations I've seen struggling with the strategic initiatives being implemented in their part. The overall turnaround time, as I mentioned earlier as well, it is very sensitive for a threat intel information to be absorbed as earliest as your security controls, and therefore the turnaround time around the intel being consumed is something which is greatly reduced. I've seen, somewhere around 4 to 5 hours is what minimum organizations and the industries are currently looking at when they are actually from the time of arrival to the actual time of implementation. Whereas, as you saw in the utility that we showcased, it barely took around 4 to 5 minutes for us to actually end-to-end complete the workflow. And when you talk about a high level optimization or high level automation for the enterprise organization, this entire workflow can be actually stitched into the orchestration, and there it can be parallelly executed as well. The overall optimization that I have spoken about in terms of the organization benefits, I think the major portion lies in this turnaround time itself. But other than this, the actioning reports, as you saw, we showcase the reports as well, which are something which are self-explanatory in terms of the evidence, in terms of the enrichment factors, because you don't really need to justify why I did not block the other 5 or 6 indicators, whereas I went ahead and blocked these 56 indicators out of the 65 or 69 odd indicators that I received. Similarly, my entire approach or my entire direction towards the protection of my environment or my organization is simply optimized towards proactive rather than reactive in terms of the threat intel, because now I can allow my analyst to not only do the intel contextualization, but also utilize the contextual information for the threat hunting, as we showed about the TTP hunting. With that being said, I would move to the next slide, where we are touching base upon the key strategies that actually enable the CTI program or your CTI function to be elevated to the next level. So as Avkash, in the very beginning, as Avkash had mentioned that, Intel or any kind of operation is more about the collaboration. So your collaboration, how tightly you are collaborating with each other, how you are tightly collaborating with your regulators, with your organization, with your governing agencies as well, and of course with your field providers is something which is very important factor over here. You really need to understand that your CTI program cannot sustain or cannot run as an individual lone wolf in this particular ecosystem, where each and every player in the market is being targeted. Each and every organization is subject to threat, is subjected to the vulnerability, subjected to the attacks, right? And therefore, collaboration is the key over here. So had you not been informed about X attacker, X indicator, you would never be in a situation to actually protect your organization. And therefore, if someone is sharing, you are also equally contributing to the community, to the organizations, or to your peer members, right? That is the first factor. And I would say the CTI factor is something which is heavily relying on the collaboration over here, not only within the organization, but across the organizations, across the communities. The Intel contextualization, I think we have overall covered all the aspects, and why exactly the relation aspect is very important when we are actually when an Intel is being enriched and plus investigated. The automation for this enrichment factor is something which should definitely be considered as a heavy weight, because when you're talking about enrichment, you cannot have a human factor involved in just something which requires a lot many sources to be queried at a single go. And therefore, automation is something which is definitely required when you're talking about elevation, when you're talking about those factors which elevate your overall security practices for your threat intel domain or threat intel vertical. Technical and tactical intel, I think we have talked enough about the technical intel, which has been always focusing on the indicators, observables, and actual observables. But when we talk about the tactical, as I mentioned, we should also looking at the investigation aspects. And those investigation capabilities are something which a utility should definitely have. So overall, if I have to talk about all these investigation analysis, we should not really forget the whole purpose, which is more or less complementing the human with an Intel orchestration solution, and of course reducing the fatigue or reducing the burnout of the analyst by minimizing false positives or identifying those false positives and removing them at the first glance itself, instead of absorbing them and then removing it from your security controls after facing an business impact. And last but not the least, I think visualization and the visual appeal for the overall investigation and the CTI lifecycle is a definite requirement today, because you cannot really have everything going under your nose. You don't really need to have that kind of scenario anymore. You really need to have everything in front of your eyes, more than just being aware about, just being knowing about it, but rather you should be aware about what is happening on your CTI lifecycle. And therefore, visualization or the threat metrics, reports, dashboards, or I would say in simple words, I would like to mention that the matrix around each and every activity being carried forward as a part of your CTI lifecycle is something which should be definitely complementing in your overall CTI practices. And there are a lot many solutions in the market. There are a lot many products in the market. And along with this, I think there is something which even Cyber offers in terms of the CTI practices or CTI product, which is CTIX for us. we are actually utilizing all these capabilities and enabling organizations, and we have a lot of organizations which have been benefited from these kind of matrix or this kind of strategies which has enabled their organization to elevate their security practices. Going forward to the Intel framework, I would like to hand it over to Akash. Akash.
Yeah, so thanks, Bhavin. I think those strategies, plays a very key role when you are want to standardize the overall CTI operation, and that's why I say technology is one part, but when you start, you need to make sure the intent is there, right? You have the right strategies in place that yes, you want this key pointers, when you mature on your CTI program, and that's why this pointer becomes important. If you see now the overview of the framework which we have put together, this is nothing but the summary of what we are talking till now. If you start looking it from the left side, it's more of like Intel aggregation ingestion layer, where you are aggregating your intel from multiple sources, and then you start normalizing that intel into a standard format. Let's say the 2.0, 2.1 that we generally normalize the intel because it's an industry standard developed for threat intel practices, and everybody has started adopting the 6-axis today. So we aggregate the intel, we normalize that intel, let's say in a standard like 6, 2.0, 2.1, and then after normalization, you start enriching, analyzing, or scoring. Again, this with the help of machine as well as the human. Machine means you can automate the score engine by multiple factors, as well as you can auto enrich your intel by looking up into multiple sources. You can analyze, and then based on those, maybe your humans are coming and acting upon that intel manually. Also, the rules that you write, you have the capability, either you are automating, you are writing automated rules saying that based on the X score or Y score or Z score, you segregate your intel, and then you start processing those intel either into your SIEM or firewall or antivirus based on the scoring and the policies that you are defining in your CTI program. So that's where in the right side you will see the dissemination of the intel is starting. Either you are taking action on those intel, or you are consuming the intel at human level. So that captures the overall framework from left to right: intel collection, normalization, enrichment, analysis, scoring, and action, and dissemination. And the whole ecosystem is giving you need to govern as well by right set of metrics, visibility for your CTI program. And that's where the whole threat intel platforms today comes into the market to help you mature your threat intel programs, to help you elevate your strategies, as well as to keep a track on the right set of metrics for your program. I know we are running short on time, so we'll just take few questions if you have here for threat intel, and then we will move it to the IR role play.
Yeah. Akash, we have received a number of questions from the public, which shows the interest of the workshop. But like you said, we just have 30 more minutes to go, so I'll just take 1 or 2 questions. So the first question that we have is, what metrics or KPIs should a startup use to measure security effectiveness of threat response?
That's a really interesting question. In terms of a threat response, first of all, the most important metrics. So whenever I personally derive the metrics, I will start from the life cycle. Let's say we just spoke about threat intel, so I will give the response in context to threat intel. We'll have the metrics for IR will be a different. Let's say when you start integrating the TI feeds, so it's important to monitor the ROI or the quality of those feeds. So that will be one most important metric, that how good ROI those feeds are giving in terms of giving you the right information. The information is coming first to you, and information where all places you are using, how many incidents are triggered during using those threat intel, and how many of those incidents were actually false positive or true positive. So during the life cycle, you need to measure the KRI, KPI, and few of the metrics, and also a few metrics if you want to talk on threat response specifically. Then you need to make sure that how orchestration is helping you reduce your MTTD or MTTR. So obviously orchestration will help you more on MTTR aspect, but in MTTD also, are you leveraging the threat intel aspect? Are you leveraging the other contextual data from your CMDB or from your HR database to bring more context to the analyst when they respond to the incident. So and also the most important metrics which I would measure is the the root causes of the incident which we are investigating. What are the root causes that you are capturing? Means, was it just an misconfiguration or error? Was it actually a threat? The threat was insider threat, external threat. Was that threat you were able to trace back to a malware or a threat actor? So what all level you are able to monitor and measure the RCA of any investigation which is happening. So there are like few important KRI KPI I would like any startup or any enterprise to monitor.
Thanks, Akash. Akash, next interesting question is what quotient of resources or investments should be tapped to the threat response and remediation?
So again, this is very tricky question, and it will vary from organization to organization. Let's say someone working in the startup, they are already leveraging a lot of technology. So the resource investment I would look for more from a startup is heavy on engineering and technology side, because anyway there one person is wearing multiple hats in terms of the cyber security when they are responding. So I would say definitely the heavy investment for the startup would be the technology, leveraging the technology, automation, orchestration to fill the gap of the human which they are running short on. While on the larger enterprise, still this remains valid, because there the challenge is different. Let's say I have a 10-member team. The churning rate is very high. People are leaving the organization because of a lot of mundane tasks. They don't have anything new to learn. So still automation orchestration plays a key role in terms of offloading the mundane tasks from my L1 and moving those L1 towards doing more L2 tasks, and leveraging their skills in more threat investigation tasks. At the same time, for larger enterprise, the technology investment will give them visibility, the governance structure where they can document. And on the human resource side, right, they need to invest more on elevating their skills, as well as they are doing the right investigation, they are utilizing the right data to move the organization towards the threat context aware or context aware incident response or the threat response, and not just sticking their head into the mundane task of copy paste or the email communication.
Sure. I think there are a number of other questions, but we can continue with the presentation and we can take those up a little later.
Yes, sure, for sure. I think with that, we will move to the incident response. Bhavin, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, sure. So I think we have already taken up the intel response now. As the overall workflow we had introduced earlier as well, where we will be focusing firstly on the intel response, which we have completed as of now. And now we'll be looking forward to the incident response. Now, talking about both the response, what are the different methodologies, and what are the different aspects, and how do they differ from each other is something that we would be going ahead with. To quickly run down over here as well, we have taken help of a character who would be helping us out with the understanding about someone who is actually at the ground level working with these IR operations. So over here, we are looking at someone who is looking at the IR operations, who is heading the team, and at the same time, he has a lot more responsibility than just an incident response in simple manner. We would like to introduce Justin Smith, who is just like an incident response lead, who looks after and manages and maintains a 7-member team around his organization. This entire team is responsible for handling the incident, responding to the incident, and of course, maintaining the overall case, I would say case studies around the learnings. And of course, during this entire operation life cycle, he has a various set of responsibilities that he has to ensure that his team religiously follows, and he makes sure that his responsibilities are not limited to the operations, but also to the elevation standard or to the elevation aspects of the IR life cycle. I would not really spend a lot of time on the responsibilities, but there are two specific pointers that I would like to press upon. First is, as I said, the first responder for the incidents is something which is a heavy responsibility on any IR responder or maybe an incident responder over here. We talk about the first responders as someone who actually takes the investigation, takes the charge of that investigation, and owns that investigation till the end of the life cycle, till the closure and till the remediation of that specific learning or the specific incident outcome. And the second aspect which I would like to emphasize on is the event investigation and analysis, where you have a lot of investigation timelines that you're looking at. You have strict SLAs, you have governance factors involved around it, and last but not the least, you have a collaboration as well involved when you're actually working on an investigation, where you're working with your desktop support, where you're working with a network team, you're working with your security forensic team, and at the same time you're working with your security analysts who are actually the investigators of at the log level, at the event level, and so on. The entire suite of people or suite of teams is more or less responsible for the overall IR lifecycle. Going forward with the day-to-day challenges, I think we have a lot many challenges to focus on when it comes to IR, but the specifics element, which is the first one, which is the highest causing burnout for every analyst today as a part of IR, is the volume of alerts that they have to more or less look into at a daily basis. I've seen organizations, I've seen customers who are complaining about their analysts not being able to come up with or able to handle the workload just because they are not realizing the fact that it is not really the human factor which needs to be added up, but it is the technology factor that needs to come up to the level and support the humans or support the beings to be able to handle that kind of workload. There are such organizations who have an incident flow of around 1,000 to 2,000 incidents at times in day when they have a peak alert season during their business hours or during their I would say the peak seasons of sales or peak season of e-commerce organizations. They usually tend to have a lot more attacks because these kind of attacks are more targeted in nature, and therefore during these kind of situations there's a high amount of alerts which is flowing into the analyst queues. And second aspect is where the manual alert investigation is something which is causing a lot of incident fatigue, alert fatigue for the humans or for the members of the IR. When you talk about manual analysis, I think we have already touched base upon the type of manual investigation that an usually analyst does for the email-based alert, right? I mean, email-based intel being report. Similarly, when an incident is onboarded, whenever an incident is reported by the SOC, there are not many incident-specific investigations that are carried out by the IR members, like getting an access to the remote control, informing user about it, quarantining the asset before the risk is something which is widespread across organization, and at the same time performing forensic analysis for the malware identification and malware research analysis. So these are the specifics that actually the analyst should be focusing more. But rather than that, they also ended up focusing on the other factors like, the ITSM processes, the compliance or regulatory processes, and last but not the least, I would say maintenance of the IR runbooks and maintenance of the battle rhythms that they are carrying out in their environment or in their security response practices. Talking about the high MTT and MTDR, I think this is a problem statement across the organization, IR practices, because most of the organizations usually struggle with the MTTR factors because they have a higher variance in terms of the MTTR, and therefore the orchestration or the automation like technologies are definitely need of the R for helping the organizations optimize their MTTD and MTTR. The overall incident response 101 lies around the automation of the incident onboarding, because that is the first step towards an incident acknowledgement or an alert acknowledgement. Talking about the next step, I think the immediate response towards an incident is obviously adding contextual information to it, adding investigation to it, and adding the enrichment factors around the specifics that are identified as a part of the incident. What is the indicator associated with? Is that indicator malicious? Who is the asset owner? Who is the asset owner known previously for similar activities? Has that asset been patched regularly? And those all enrichment factors are something which usually contribute to a holistic investigation for any incident being targeted. The automation of these IR runbooks is something which is definitely again add up to the next step, where we talk about these runbooks defining how that specific investigation has to be carried out, and automating these kind of steps or automating these kind of runbook specific processes usually optimizes the human efforts here. And therefore, the orchestration and automation actually comes into the play when I talk about the automated runbooks. So you cannot just simply add an automation and expect the entire runbook to be executed end to end. And that is where the orchestration comes into the play. The orchestration helps you to build such small automations, stitch them together, and therefore you can actually accomplish an end-to-end IR runbook. And last but not the least, I think for automated incident as well, you would still require that report or that summary that usually is a mandate for every organization following strict organizational security practices, strict regulatory practices, and last but not the least, following the NIST incident handling guidelines or incident handling practices, which is more or less the very common and very much adapted incident response practices in current market. Talking about it, I would like to hand it over to Shreyans. Actually, he has a utility, and that is something that we would like to present over here, which would be actually showcasing a small piece of automation, how the incidents can be onboarded, and how exactly these small piece of automation can be utilized for their day-to-day incident response practices. Sunit, can you enable the screen sharing, please?
Yeah, it's done. So Shreyash is sharing.
Thanks, Bhavin. Thanks for the rundown through what are the challenges which the analyst workflow face. So I'll not go through the entire challenges, but we'll run through the analyst workflow, what happens when an incident, for example, we'll take a C2C incident, what happens when an incident comes into a security operation center, what exactly the workflow looks like as an analyst workflow, and how can we automate this and, cut down the time period of MTDD and MTDR to, operationalize the incident response in a faster way. So there are different stages, wherein the first stage is the preparation phase, where we record the incident related details. In a traditional way, the people in SOC who do not own a case management tool, they do it on a static files. Like, for example, they do the incident response or record the evidences on an Excel sheet. Then they gather all the identifiers and the owner related details, as you spoke, Bhavin. The asset related details, who is the user, who is the owner of the user, was that asset previously involved in any security incident. All those types of insights have to be gathered by an analyst. And then the detection analysis phase goes through, wherein he analyzes the logs, the payloads which have been executed for that particular security incident, and then the enrichment through external technologies, internal technologies, where we have found some traces of that particular malicious nature activity of that particular indicator onto our internal tools as well. Then we find out if, based on our incident response investigation, we find out if it is malicious in nature or not. If it is not, maybe if it's a false positive after doing the log analysis and payload analysis, we can directly go ahead and close that incident. If it's true, it's malicious in nature, then what is the next step would do? Like in an analyst workflow, we raise a ticket to our security concerned teams, like firewall team, proxy team, as we discussed in our threat intel operations as well. So we trace and notify the user manually that some malicious activity is happening from your system which you are not aware of. And then the next step is investigation and eradication, where we recover that machine or perform an forensic analysis on that endpoint by taking that machine into account, like quarantining that machine and passing on it to the forensic and investigation team. And then the next step would be, like, during the forensic analysis or after the forensic analysis, we identify and document all of the learnings through which the attacker was able to execute that attack within our environment. And then comes the recovery phase, where we go through the different process of recovery actions, like the malware traces, if it has been found on any other machines as well, and we clean that image, or we store the backup of the image wherein the infection is not found, and notify the stakeholders with the relevant incident summary, and then close the incident. This is the analyst workflow wherein analysts spend a lot of time doing all of these tasks. So I'll go ahead and show the utility which we have created, which is Aiss. I'll full screen. So if you look at this, this is automated incident response utility which we have created. So I'll go ahead and show you the connectivity which we have have integrated for this particular tool. It's through a Splunk alert, wherein we are connecting Splunk via an API, and it asks us for an alert name. What kind of alert do you want to fetch the details for? So if I enter hit to malicious URL, it will go ahead and make it API call to Splunk and fetch the alert related details. If there is any alert named as hit to malicious URL, what are the indicators? Right now we are not focusing on the investigation or the case management part in this particular utility, but the orchestration part, or the automation part of this utility, where we are able to easily extract the indicators found into this particular utility. And what is the next step which it shows? So we have extracted the number of indicators, which are 4, which are involved into this particular URL related incident. So let me go ahead and enrich these indicators and find out if any kind of contextual information is available over OTX or VirusTotal about these indicators which we have found. So once the process is completed, we'll go ahead and look what kind of enrichment we have derived from this particular indicators, and based on that we can automate the action as well. If no enrichment has been found, basis of that we can avoid those indicators or directly block them, as we had seen in our previous demo as well, where we blocked them into PFSense firewall. So I'll go ahead and after this I'll show you the enrichment related details which we have found through VirusTotal. So I'll show the indicators. So these are the indicators which we found onto the security incident of hit to malicious URL. These are the 4 IPs which are involved. For that, if we see, these are the 2 IPs which have some relations, and VirusTotal says there's no association with anything, and there's 0 score coming up for these particular 2 indicators. So if I go back to my script and enter yes for the Intel actioning for the identified indicators, what will happen is the indicators which have some contextual analysis will go ahead and block it on PFSense firewall. So I'll skip this part because we are seeing the actioning part on firewall, and we'll go back to our slides and continue with our next workflow, which is related to the orchestration. IR orchestration. So this part which we saw is more of an automation, wherein everything is getting executed sequentially. There's no parallel execution of any task, or not large number of complex workflows can be written onto this particular script, like writing multiple complex workflows. So we have our orchestration tool where we have recorded a video where we can showcase you guys how we can write complex workflows with conditional nodes, and we can write multiple conditions, and these kinds of execution. When we talk about execution of the time of these scripts, if we look at the overview, if we talk about manual will take around 3 to 4 hours, as I previously told. And we talk about the scripts which we are deriving, it can take, if there are more number of indicators or more number of actions have to be taken, it can take around 15 to 20 minutes. But looking at the orchestration tool, which has better management capability, like the parallel execution of nodes and everything, so we can execute that within a minute as well. So if we see, this is a playbook or the runbook, which you can say is designed for a C2C type of incident, wherein we are running the playbook, the execution has started, and within the first step, within seconds, we are able to retrieve the alert from SIM, and we are gathering and triaging the alert details. We are creating an incident in the case management tool. We are updating the related details. We are retrieving the asset related data, which is stored in the case management tool, and so on. Like, we are checking the IOCs in real time. Like, if you look at the speed which we are doing in the scripts is a lot faster than what we are doing using manual process as well as the Python automation scripts. Now again, we are already reaching the step of blocking that IP address on the firewall for the same particular incident which we derived. We are also storing those IOCs for historical purpose into our internal inventory of threat intelligence. So looking at the speed, when you compare for like automation scripts, manual and orchestration tools where you can write such complex workflows, it makes a very big difference in terms of MTTD and MTTR. So I believe I'll pass on back the slides to Bhavin for the next part.
Thanks, Shreyans. Let me just quickly go through the slide and we'll continue from. Yeah, I hope the screen is visible.
No, Bhavin.
Okay, thanks. So I think when we talked about the IR orchestration,
So it said screen share ended.
Okay. Is it better now?
It's coming up. Just give a few seconds. No.
Again ended.
It starts and then it ends again.
Can you pass on the rights to me or maybe Shreya?
Is it okay now?
Slides? Yeah.
Yes, it is working now.
Okay, perfect. So talking about the orchestration, I think the workflow that we had showcased in the video talks a lot more than automation. So where you can actually build complex workflows, you can actually implement your desired runbook or rather your ideal runbook into that entire flowchart, and that entire flowchart has its own small nitty-gritties being taken care at each and every step, right? So when we talk about the triaging process, I think you can have a bit more complex workflows doing that kind of triaging at each and every node level, and therefore that allows you to have that granular process being implemented for each and every security investigation and analysis requirements, right? Usually you have that kind of environment where you have to design the workflows not just to complement the runbooks, but as well as to complement the human abilities to investigate, and that is where the workflows can also take an medieval or in-between input from the humans as to in terms of the decision making, in terms of the response to be made, and there can be a subset of the playbooks that can be then forwarded or rather carried forwarded in terms of the workload. Talking about the machines to take the decisions, I think you must have seen that there were certain nodes which had like two outcomes, either true and false. So wherever you have binaries, as I mentioned earlier as well, you can actually not limit yourself to the binaries, because when you talk about automation, you're left with a very limited set of options. But when you talk about a complex workflow like the playbook structure that we just saw, you have a lot more capability.
So we will be, my team and the KPMG team and also Sonia from Nasscom, will be outreaching the report to all of you. Please do share it with all your team members and anybody in your global corporations. Internally, if any PCC wants a briefing on the insights for this report, my team and the KPMG team will be happy to set up follow-up one-on-one calls. Because often when we release a research report, people do ask us for a briefing for their team so that the broader team understands what are the insights and the trends that we are noticing. We are happy to set up those follow-up calls to be able to brief any team that is looking for a briefing. I mean, we'll have Srinivas and team and Anand and my team will go on for, of course. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us at our 15th edition of Annual Information Security Summit. Today is our third day. There's a very rich session, almost 250 speakers we are hosting in this 3-day conference, and more than I think 50 or 60 sessions, including a lot of deep dive sessions. Several of the GCC speakers have been speaking in the last 2 days. Today also some of them are lined up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Aspect where we talk about the overall incident. An incident is actually not just one single point-to-point element. It has a lot more associated values. As we talked about the contextualization of intel information, when we're talking about the IR responses, right? This is the same aspect which is applicable to the incident as well. It can be associated to an IOC, right? When you're investigating an incident, you will get an indicator of compromise. When that indicator of compromise is being investigated, you get the TTPs which were associated with that indicators of compromise. An incident is usually majorly caused by a malware infection. So the malware detection has caused an incident. That incident had the indicators of compromise, and the indicators of compromise help you to identify the TTPs. Similarly, when you look at the malware is infected, the asset is infected with a malware. The asset is again an element or an important piece of element when we are investigating an incident, because it helps you to contextualize your internal risk elements as well, not just the external factors. Then talking about the malware, these malwares are programmed and targeted by the threat actors. Similarly, the assets are being used, so you get to know which are vulnerable users, which are those repeated offenders in terms of users who are usually going and clicking on the unsolicited emails or the suspicious emails. Similarly, assets also have the characteristics like vulnerability, which essentially helps you to categorize the kind of risk that the asset is carrying within your environment. Talk about the outputs of the incident, you get a knowledge database which helps you to understand what kind of incidents you have been looking at the past. What the incident impacts is the application availability. Let's say if an incident is impacting a business application, that would also result into reputational loss for that particular organization. And last but not the least, I think the learning section of an incident is something which is definitely required for a long-term incident response practices, because you don't really have an incident which comes and goes. You have to document the learning so that the same learnings are absorbed by the organization and as well as the management, so that strategical decisions are taken based on those learnings. And as we all know, each and every incident that an organization goes through amplifies the overall risk that the organization is currently subjected to. The key strategies around involved for the IR practices and that elevation is required to make it a threat response is more like you need to have that orchestration system so that you can actually leverage that bed system where you can have multiple technologies or multiple components talking to each other and enabling the humans with actual deliverable, which is more to do with the forensic or maybe the malware analysis, or maybe actually defining the strategies or utilizing their skill sets in better aspects. And most importantly, I think the IR framework alignment is very important over here as well, because whatever solution you go for in the market today, you really need to ensure that the IR practices in your organization or the industry best practices are something which are imbibed in that particular product or in that particular technology to help you to elevate not only in terms of your existing practices, but also to the industry best practices being followed across. AI and ML capabilities are no longer a dream, obviously. Each and every solution really needs to inbuild that capability and bring up that functionality to complement the human abilities and help them with the contextual information to infuse the intel. When I talk about the infused intel, as I said, that you have contextualization happening around your incident as well. So when I talked about the connect the dots aspect, that is the actual incident aspect, which is connected with assets, users, malware, a threat actor, and other 100 elements which are present in your own environment. And these all small intel, be it an internal intelligence or be it an external intelligence, these all intel need to be fused with that particular incident and should be contributing to greatly towards your incident response strategy for dealing these kind of incidents. Lastly, IR governance is a key element that each and every elevation really requires to follow, because you have shifts, you have people coming in different shifts, you have people working in different time zones. You may have your follow the sun approach where you have different teams situated across the world. And therefore that shift handover is something that we usually have as a problem statement, which usually organizations want to target. Battle rhythm, again, another very important aspect for IR practices, because whenever there is a contextual awareness being implemented, you really need to have multiple teams coming together, working it out, discussing about the problem statement, and documentation of these aspects is very important. And therefore, maintenance of the shift roster, helping you out with the report metrics, and lastly, documenting the threat briefings that you are actually conducting. Over here, I would like to hand it over to Akash, because from here, I would like him to actually present the threat response framework as well.
Yeah, so just to summarize this framework, right? Again, how we saw the threat framework, threat response framework is again the same overview. If you see from the left to right, we are automatically trying to onboard the incident from multiple sources. We are trying to, on the top, we are trying to enrich those incident data from external context, internal context. On the right side, we are trying to take automated actions, and actions is on machines as well as the human, because we feel that human and machine are equally needs to be orchestrated within the complete threat response framework. So we are taking care of the incident, enriching those incidents with the right context from the threat, the threat context as well as internal context. And at the bottom, the governance framework, which Bhavin was talking about, the shift roster management, the threat briefing management, managing the day-to-day battle rhythm, and monitoring the key KRI KPIs. And the three things which I have kept in the center part is, the orchestration automation, while case management is enabling the collaboration between the human and machine, as well as, the threat intel management is equally tied back to the overall framework or overall the ecosystem that we are trying to design. Take thing in the starting that, the concept of cyber fusion. So if we move next, if we just try to summarize the three things, which we have learned and talk about, the threat response, that elevating your IR to TR, we spoke about connecting the dots, managing your battle rhythm, tracking the complex KRI KPI there in terms of time and the cost, and also the attribution, the threat attribution, and the correlation, bringing the threat angle into the overall IR ecosystem. And also independently leveraging the automation and orchestration. And we understand that orchestration automation is not just the need of your IR team, but it is required by your threat intel team, your incident response team, your threat hunting team, vulnerability management team. So all the team needs the orchestration automation. So why you need to have a look on orchestration automation as an independent strategy vertical in your overall strategy for with human as well as machine. And the intelligence, the threat intel stack that we saw, making sure the life cycle of the threat intel is covered, the intel aggregation, analysis, normalization, investigation, visualization is covered holistically in your Fusion ecosystem. So that kinds of summarize what we have spoken here in terms of both the segments, in the first IR segment as well as threat intel segment. IR segment, elevating your IR to the TR and having the orchestration independently run. That we'll open up the floor for any question and answers here.
Yeah. Of course, thank you so much. You summarized really well. Like I said, we have a number of questions, but unfortunately we don't have time. But let me just take one question, which is in the event of data breach, what should be our response plan?
That's a very elaborative answer it may require, but I would say, you have to be prepared for that data breach, right? So if you go by the standard framework, IR preparation is the most important phase of any life cycle which people tend to ignore, right? So you cannot respond to a breach if you are not fully prepared. What you will respond is, in very ad hoc manner, or how your intuitions or, what your mind says, right? But if you have practiced something before, if you have documented and also practiced those things, you will respond accordingly. For example, let's say when a data breach happens, the first important thing is stay calm, right? Because when any incident happens, you need to keep yourself very calm. First of all, analyze the depth, right? How much data, what is the horizon of this incident? How much data has gone? And then you start analyzing that, is it an actual incident? Is it an insider leakage? Is it because of some vulnerability exploitation? And then you start going into more analysis or investigation phase of that. You start finding the RCA, so that from where the leakages happen, so that you can contain the threat. Otherwise, you will say that I will block this IP, I will block this IP, I will shut down this application. It's not going to help you unless you know the horizon, that from where the leakages happen and how much leakages happen, and then you can start acting upon it. You can go into the forensic investigation, and the recovery, you will start bouncing back to your business as usual. In terms of how you are doing. Let's say the credit card breach was happened, you are reissuing the card to all the stakeholders. You are communicating to your stakeholder, because communication plays a key role in any incident. Communication to my internal stakeholders, to my board, as well as to my customer, because that's where the trust lies, right? So in any incident, not just data breach, but communication is the important factor, and you should communicate very effectively. Your breach is fine. It's nothing to hide. You should not shy away from, taking the responsibility. And you should bluntly go and stand there and, fight back the situation, that how you will make sure that, this thing will not happen again. And that gives the confidence to your internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Again, to short of time, I will summarize, that very, very high level.
So I think this brings us to an end to this wonderful workshop. And thank you, Afkash, Bhavin, and Shriyaj for this wonderful time and insights. Based on the question, I'm again reiterating that your workshop has been received well. But yeah, thank you so much. And to our audience, please stay focused on the third day of Aiss, where we have number of plenaries and the track sessions lined up. And of course, we have the awards function tonight. So please stay online, stay connected. Thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you, everyone. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us offline. We are here only, or maybe we have already shared this slide. It will be available publicly. So, feel free to reach out to us for any queries. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.